Okay. Naomi, you ready?
I'm ready. Should I share my screen?
No, just wait. Dr. Slade will share his screen.
Okay.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2023 International E-Conference on Holocaust Studies. My name is Dr. Mehek Burza, and I'm the head of the Holocaust and Religious Studies in the Global Center for Religious Research, founded and headed by Dr. Darren Slade. Keep in mind that each of these presentations are video recorded, so the information presented here will be available free of charge to you just for coming out and supporting us. So thank you for that. Now, for those attending live, feel free to use the chat box to discuss with other attendees or to ask questions as they come up. Our speakers will do their best to answer your questions at the end of their presentations. You'll also be able to unmute yourself at the end so that you can directly ask presenter questions by your own. And with that said, it gives me immense pleasure to introduce our speaker for this session, Naomi. Naomi Yavne is chair in humanities and professor of languages and cultures at Loyola University, New Orleans. Her forthcoming book, Rereading Anna Frank, emerged from Naomi's disrupted experience as a Fulbright scholar in Netherlands in spring 2020, and her ongoing collaboration with the Anna Frank House and its US partner, the Anna Frank Center at the University of South Carolina. As director of the Loyola Anna Frank Project, Naomi works to educate New Orleans middle and high school students about the Holocaust and its relevance for today's world. Now, Naomi, the floor is all yours. You can share your screen now.
Thank you so much, Mehek, and thank you, Daryl, and thank you everyone who is here today, whether in person, over live screen. If there's something that you don't understand or is unclear, I'm happy to clarify things. I'm just looking for my share screen is hidden here once again. And so we'll get started. Now this talk and this work was prepared in conjunction with Shoshana Yavne Shattenkirk-Borva, who is my daughter, just to be clear, who is a professional composer and lives in Bergen, Norway, where it's after midnight. So I feel a little reluctant to say that because I know for Mehek it's even later, but I will be sharing Shoshana's thoughts with you this evening. So I'd like to start by talking about our work, I Still Believe, which is about a 5-minute composition for children's choir composed by Shoshana and inspired by Anne Frank. And we'll talk about the creation, rehearsal, and performance of this piece as a pedagogical tool for teaching middle school students, in our case in New Orleans, about the Holocaust. We argue that the mnemonic effect of singing Anne's words, as well as the physical and emotional benefits of choral singing, help to create enhanced learning for students and a sense of connection to Anne's experience and the lessons of the Holocaust. So first, I'll talk about, well, why Anne Frank and why I Still Believe, which is kind of a controversial text in Holocaust studies. Then I'll talk a little bit about what the Loyola Anne Frank Project is and what we're trying to do, the educational landscape of New Orleans, and why a choral piece about the Holocaust. So first, why Anne Frank? Now, when I tell non-academics that I'm writing a book about Anne Frank, the response is almost universally enthusiastic. I constantly hear, I love Anne Frank. Some folks, like my hairdresser, share powerful memories of visiting the eerily quiet house on the Prinsengracht in Amsterdam. Others, women especially, talk about reading the diary. I did a presentation on Anne Frank in 7th grade, my dean told me. She grew up in Panama. I read Anne Frank in 6th grade, and I started keeping a diary. I hear over and over and over from my students and from people I meet. A Jewish woman from Argentina told me that she played Anne in the 7th grade play, while a New Orleans woman informed me that she played Margot in high school and wanted to be sure that I knew it was pronounced Margot and not Margot. For many women, especially, this connection with Anne is focused less on Anne as a victim of the Holocaust than as an emerging teenage writer. As with Louisa May Alcott's fictional alter ego, Jo March, readers are drawn to a strong female protagonist who models outspokenness, feminism, and the craft of writing. Anne's diary has had special meaning as well for those facing adversity. Her powerful storytelling means many people feel that Anne is speaking directly to them. It speaks right to me as a little Jewish girl growing up in New York City or in Argentina, and inspires people facing challenges. Zlata Filipovic, for example, who wrote her own diary of the Bosnian War, high school students living in poverty and violence in Long Beach, California, who wrote the Freedom Writer's Diary, and imprisoned for 27 years on Robbins Island, Nelson Mandela found solace and inspiration reading Anne's diary over and over again. Legend has it he read it so many times the volume fell apart and he had to copy passages onto toilet paper. In the United States, with the highest rate of incarceration in the world, The Diary of a Young Girl is one of the top 10 books read in prison. And Elie Wiesel, who of course, as we know, is a Holocaust survivor himself, wrote of Anne, who has not read and reread The Diary of Anne Frank? Who has not been moved by the mischievous and innocent look that this unforgettable young Jewish girl gave to a beaten and ridiculed humanity, desperately searching for reasons to hope? We love Anne. We cannot not love her. And yet, if Anne Frank is widely beloved and admired, some Holocaust scholars respond to Anne Frank with eye rolls. There's considerable debate in Holocaust studies regarding Anne and her text. Can we actually consider the diary a Holocaust narrative when it tells us nothing of life in the camps? How Jewish was she really? And why, in fact, do we pay so much attention to this one girl whose story, it said, is so far outside the normal Holocaust narrative? Many scholars of the Holocaust argue that a focus on Anne Frank, in fact, does a disservice to a larger understanding of the Shoah. First, some question her abilities as a writer. Robert Alter dismisses Anne's writing as adolescent. Well, she was a teenager. He cites Hannah Arendt's comment that the cult of Anne Frank is cheap sentimentality at the expense of catastrophe. And he queries why we focus on this one teenage girl when there are much more complex diaries written by mature writers who grapple far more substantively with the existential questions of the Holocaust. Other critics complain that the story that Anne recounts in the diary, written before her arrest, deportation to Auschwitz, and death of typhus and starvation in Bergen-Belsen, shapes a false, or at least profoundly incomplete narrative of the Holocaust to the detriment of understanding its larger brutalities. Can we actually consider the book a Holocaust narrative when it tells us nothing of life in the camps? Deborah Lipstadt, for example, says definitively no. This, she says, is not the story of the Shoah. Other scholars agree with Lipstadt's assessment. Anne's story is palatable, they argue, because the horrors she describes are largely confined to fear and discomfort. The family is not hiding in a sewer or a hole in the ground, but has beds and food and a toilet, even if it gets clogged. They are supported by loving helpers who choose to risk their lives out of a sense of moral obligation rather than pecuniary gain. And unlike prisoners in Auschwitz risking beatings or death to observe holy days, the residents of the annex demonstrate their spiritual resilience by keeping up a semblance of life and order despite their circumstances. They study, write, cook meals, and celebrate birthdays. We may find Anne's story intriguing, inspiring, or even charming, this line of argument goes, but that is only because the diary stops on August 1st, 1944, 3 days before the arrest. Now, if some contend that the Anne of the diary doesn't suffer enough, others, like Cynthia Ozick, maintained that for contemporary readers, even to imagine a point of connection with a child victim only serves to diminish Anne's painful experience. Both Osick and other scholars claim that the dehumanizing nature of Anne's death, the exact date is unknown, give the lie to her most famous words, "In spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart." These words, such critics emphasize, were written before Anne was arrested, deported on a cattle car, tattooed, shaved, starved, and buried in an unmarked grave. But for the Loyola Anne Frank project, I chose to commission a work for children's chorus called I Still Believe. So before we dismiss those words as naive or inappropriate to the context of the Holocaust, I'd like to look at their context in Anne's diary. Anne includes this famous sentence in her entry for Saturday, 15th July, 1944, so about 3 weeks before she's arrested, and it follows a terrible lament about her loneliness. "I've felt so terribly lonely for a long time, so left out, neglected, and misunderstood. Daddy has always talked to me as a child who was going through difficult phases." In bleak language, idealism destroyed and crushed, people showing their ugliest side, Anne describes the struggle we young people face in maintaining our opinions in a time where idealism is destroyed and crushed, where people show their ugliest side, and where there is doubt about truth and justice and God. Now, this is my translation from the Dutch, which is harsher and more blunt, I think, than the English. And then she continues, "It is a great wonder that I have not given up all my expectations because they seem so absurd and unrealizable. Yet I hold on to them despite everything because I still believe in the inner goodness of people." Notice the translation of the Dutch, right? It's, "I still believe in the inner goodness of people." And I continue, this is the translation that most people know, right? "It is utterly impossible for me to build everything on the basis of death, misery, and confusion. I see how the world is slowly being turned into a desert. I hear the rolling thunder getting louder and louder, but when I look at the sky, I think there will be peace and tranquility in the world order again. In the meantime, I have to keep my ideas high and dry in case the times to come, they may still be possible to implement." So reading these words, written a month before her 15th birthday, and less than 3 weeks before, as I said, she was discovered, we have to remember that Anne is no longer a naive little girl, but a teenager struggling, in spite of everything, to hold on to ideals. We think of Anne as a little girl in part because 15 is still a young age, getting younger every year, and also because each of the many, many pictures we do have of her was taken before she went into hiding, just a few weeks after her 13th birthday. So we read the words of an adolescent, but our image of her is forever much younger. In fact, in the annex, Anne grew 13 centimeters, over 5 inches. And although 15 is not an adult, it's not a child, at Auschwitz, Anne was not sent to immediate death with the other children. She was considered old and strong enough to work. As her revision of her own diary makes clear, she wants to be taken seriously, not as she laments in the beginning of the passage I've cited, treated like a child going through a phase. So after 2 years in hiding, frustrated and lonely, frightened and hungry, she's not just a character in a Hallmark Christmas movie chirping out, "People are good at heart." Despite criticism to the effect, Anne Frank thought people were nice until she met people who weren't. Anne already knew that many people were not good at heart. In October 1942, so almost 2 years earlier, she had written about the brutality of the Nazis, leaving a disabled old Jewish woman out on her stoop in the cold during a roundup. She shared what she had heard about Westerbork, about the camps in the East, and the likelihood that Jewish people were being gassed. Looking at this oft-quoted passage, the essential word is despite, in spite of everything. She's affirming a commitment to a vision, not that everyone is good, but that there is an inherent goodness in each of us. As the Jewish tradition expresses it, we are each created in B'Tselem Elohim, in the image and likeness of God. So the foundational lessons of these words is the recognition of innate human dignity. To comprehend how the Holocaust could have happened, why genocide continues to happen, and how racist systems continue to be perpetuated, we must each move beyond statistics and the panoramic sweep of events to consider the perspectives, lived experiences, choices, and values of individuals. We use Anne's diary in the Loyola Anne Frank project because students connect to this adolescent trying to make sense of a world turned upside down. Anne speaks to teenagers quarreling with their parents or feeling misunderstood, teenagers who are hungry, who have witnessed gun violence, are despondent because their sexual identity is demonized in contentious public debate. This sense of connection makes them curious to learn about Anne's larger context and the Holocaust, and we hope guides them toward thinking critically and acting justly. Anne is extraordinary not because no other girls were in hiding, but because, in fact, so many people were hiding for their lives. And even as Jewish people were being demonized, dehumanized, and destroyed, Anne kept a witty, insightful diary that offers a powerful witness that each of the 1.5 million murdered Jewish children was a unique individual. So that if some claim that this famous affirmation, "I still believe in spite of everything, that people are good at heart," can only be read as tragic irony, Anne is also a figure of hope. And her decision in March of 1944 to rewrite her own diary as a novel to be read by an envisioned post-war audience in a liberated Netherlands, right? This is before June 6th, is a remarkable act of spiritual resilience that deserves to be recognized and celebrated, even as we mourn an author murdered before she had a chance to complete her work or grow up. By learning and teaching others Anne's story, young people can embrace that hope, even as the story reminds them of the dangers of stereotypes and that hatred and white supremacy left unchecked lead to death and destruction. Her diary serves as a call to recognize the innate human dignity, not just in Anne, whom we know so well from her words, but the millions of others killed in the Holocaust and the millions of other children who are currently living in hunger and fear. So Anne's story, like the Holocaust, should inspire our students and us to ask, not what would I have done, but rather what will I do? So that's the theoretical framework behind the work we do. And let me talk a little bit about what we do. The traveling exhibit, Anne Frank, A History for Today, was created by the Anne Frank House in Amsterdam, and it's been used in over 30 countries. So after my 2020 Fulbright to the Netherlands was cut short by the pandemic, I drew on my relationship with the Anne Frank House and its partner, the Anne Frank Center, to bring a copy of the exhibit, Anne Frank, A History for Today, to Loyola New Orleans on permanent loan. And the exhibit tells the story, right, Anne's story against the background of World War II and the Holocaust. And it's designed so that teenage docents can be trained to lead peers in larger conversations regarding tolerance, inclusion, mutual respect, and human rights. We also talk about the differences between perpetrators, bystanders, helpers. At Loyola, we generally bring students to campus for the training so they get the experience of being on a college campus. And then we send the exhibit to the school for several weeks so that they can give tours to the students who remained at home. So these tours can be a powerful educational experience, but it's really the docent training that's very powerful. Teenagers, usually a group of between 15 and 20, spend several days working together, building community. Training takes about 16 hours, and it includes icebreakers and interactive activities to teach knowledge of the Holocaust and anti-Semitism, who Jews really are. And also we encourage students, we develop ways to get students really to reflect on their learning. As they gain comfort with each other, We approach such difficult questions as what kind of assumptions we make about each other. Why would someone choose to help or not help? Why would somebody be a perpetrator? Participants need to get to know and feel comfortable with each other, develop knowledge of the Holocaust and Anne's story, and hone skills and develop confidence in public speaking. And you can see pictures of our tour guides being trained in conjunction with Loyola students. So there's also that opportunity, right, to build relationships with slightly older students. So I teach at Loyola University in New Orleans. It's a Jesuit liberal arts institution with a social justice mission. And as you see from the slide, about 50% of our students are students of color. We have a large number of students who are first in their families to attend college, and quite a number of low-income students. New Orleans itself is a city with a challenging educational landscape. For those not familiar with US geography, New Orleans is located in Louisiana, a state in the American Deep South that is ranked 46th nationally for pre-K-12 education, so elementary through high school, and 49th for higher education. So what can I say? Hooray for Mississippi. In 2021, 59% of the New Orleans population was Black, 31% was white, non-Latinx, about 4% Latinx, and about 3% Asian. Almost a quarter of the population lives in poverty. More than a quarter of the population has a low literacy rate, and we have the highest murder rate in the nation and a very high rate of food insecurity. So far, we have used, I still believe, the choral piece with two of our partner schools. Holy Name of Jesus is a Catholic elementary school located on our campus. It's a private school, but it's not an elite school. It's not, one of the schools in our city that costs $25,000 a year. They offer a lot of scholarships. It's part of the diocese, so people who are members of Holy Name of Jesus Parish get a discount. And the choir that premiered the work was 5th and 7th graders, and they sing once a week at the Mass, it's Catholic school, and they have a Mass every week. So this is quite an experienced choir as compared to the Anna's choir that you will hear as well. Anna's Place is an after-school enrichment program sponsored by St. Anna's Church and located in the Tremé neighborhood. Tremé has an average household income of approximately $40,000 a year, and 40% of the people in that neighborhood live in poverty. The program started over a decade ago to serve the needs of the community, that there were many children who had no place to go after school and were hungry, and a lot of them were just sort of showing up at St. Anna's Church. And so they developed this program that now serves at least 65 to 70 kids each semester. They pick the kids up from school in vans. They serve the meals when they arrive. They teach them to cook. They feed them before they go home. They help with homework, and they have enrichment activities such as choir, strings, band, and a STEM education program through NASA. We have a long community engagement relationship at our university with these kids, and so we worked to develop a program where we could bring a group of Anna's kids this semester to Loyola for a period of 4 weeks, twice a week, to spend time to be trained with the exhibit, and also to have dinner every time they came in our dining hall, which they thought was very, very exciting. Now, these are children who really know nothing about the Holocaust and almost as little about Jews. Beyond sharing that content, we also wanted them to feel a sense of connection with our students. We wanted them to feel a sense of what it was like to go to college and to be at Loyola. So the training took place in our library. They had dinner with the students and with me. And we had a final Kristallnacht commemoration event where the community was invited for tours, followed by a talk by a survivor who was a former hidden child. And the talk was preceded by a choir performance by the Anna's Place Choir. So these were 8 to 12-year-olds in the Anna's Place program many of whom happen to be younger siblings of the docents. So I'd like to talk a little bit now about the choir piece. Why did we create this choir piece? Well, we have evidence that the peer training is powerful. We do reflections with the students and we gauge their learning that way. I haven't completed an IRB for the students whose reflections we've created, so I can't really share much of that information. But the Anne Frank UK Trust, which has a similar program with pretty much the same exhibit, did a study, and one of their findings was that children were more willing to sit with people they perceived as different from a variety of marginalized groups. They were more willing to sit with them for 2 weeks at lunchtime. Anyway, this training is powerful in many ways, but it's time consuming. And the small group format means that we can't reach a lot of students. In the case of the Annis kids, we had anticipated training 15 kids, but in the end, only 10 could commit to coming twice a week in the time frame that we had. And really, even if we could have 24, right, that's still a very small number. So the question was, how do we reach other students? Yes, other students participate in the peer-led tours, but they're not ideal for every student. The exhibit has a lot of reading involved. Students are often, depending on the talents of the docents, are standing around. They don't always interact, and it doesn't always build empathy. So we wanted to figure out, was there a way that we could take larger cohorts of children and have them feel a sense of connection to Anne and her story, and also build community among the students in the way that we do in the docent training. So choral music offers interactive opportunities for large groups of students that promote engagement with the story of the Holocaust. According to composer Howard Goodall, who was the British government's singing ambassador from 2007 to 2011, when children are singing, they are taking in information and training their brains, but they don't think they are. They think they are just having fun. Singing is really an form of embodied pedagogy that builds confidence, develops motor skills, and reinforces numeracy and language development. Right, learning song lyrics can develop reading skills. Students internalize key concepts. There are also physical and emotional benefits to singing. There's this sense of feeling a sense of togetherness and belonging. Singing has a positive effect on physical well-being because it's aerobic, right? It increases oxygen in the bloodstream. It's a mindful activity that decreases cortisol and stress. It's been shown in studies to reduce levels of depression, regulate heart rate, and improve social well-being. And also, singing is about building community. In the Jewish tradition, singing is considered the highest form of prayer. And song is integral to many faiths, to the secular world, and certainly to the great city of New Orleans. When we sing together in harmony, we create something that is more than the sum of its parts. It also brings together people from various backgrounds, age levels, skill levels, and ability. Singing is one of the very few non-competitive activities that can happen where you feel like one community. You don't have to be brilliant to join a choir, and you don't have to be individually brilliant to be in a brilliant choir. So these feelings promoted by choral singing of togetherness and belonging, of sharing cooperative goals, are important elements in general in teaching about the Holocaust as a means of combating anti-Semitism, racism, and prejudice. Holocaust education, particularly with middle and high school students, is about telling the human story. Not only do we all connect to stories rather than statistics, creating a human connection helps emphasize the importance of treating all people with dignity. So when children learn Anne's story and sing her words, it creates a sense of connection with both Anne and the other choir members. And we found it also inspires curiosity. Students want to know what happened to her, what it was that she believed, and why did she believe that? So we commissioned, I for this project, but not for any specific choir. In its creation, the composer faced several challenges. And here I'm going to share with you what Shoshana wrote. The first was the music. I wanted to create a choral piece that was interesting and engaging, but also accessible to an inexperienced children's choir. I didn't want to compose music that could only be sung by highly talented musicians. I wanted it to work even if the choir only sung in unison and even if they were somewhat out of tune. I also wanted it to be engaging and memorable for both singers and listeners. A second challenge was the text. The Anne Frank fonts in Switzerland, which holds the copyright to Anne's diary, is highly restrictive in how they allow Anne's text to be used. If we had chosen to set large portions of text directly from the diary, we risked violating copyright, or if we went through the cumbersome process of obtaining permission, being obliged to pay high royalties that would make it difficult to share the piece widely and inexpensively. Since all of the funding for students to be able to participate in this program is achieved through donations and through funding that we've secured through grants, we didn't want students to have to pay, or the schools to have to pay to sing this song. So Shoshana explains her process as Anne's co-lyricist. Rather than set large portions of Anne's text, I instead started with her most famous text, "In spite of everything, I still believe that people are good at heart." And I asked the question, what do I still believe? And created my text in response. So please let me know if you can't hear this. This is a little sample of the Anna's Place Choir. So you can notice a couple of things there, right? One is, right, they're adorable, but they're not the greatest choir you've ever heard. There's one student who had the solo has a really good voice. And the students are largely singing in unison. And that part of the song, right, is text that was created in response to Anne, but is not directly taken from her diary. Now, regarding the solos, she says that she also wanted to begin the piece with short solos, whether for individuals or small groups, that would give the sense of Anne's voice all alone, and then the choir as a whole singing with Anne. Anne was herself a German Jewish refugee whose family was denied permission to emigrate to the United States. Because all four of my mother's grandparents, so this is Shoshana speaking, so it's all four of my grandparents, were Jewish refugees who immigrated to New York City, I decided to start with the opening line of Emma Lazarus's New Colossus, which is inscribed on the base of the Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor. "Give me your tired, hungry poor." This opens space for connections and conversations about immigration, identity, and belonging. And here, this is from a rehearsal of the Holy Name of Jesus choir. 1, 2, So you can hear also there the interplay between the soloists and the choir itself. You can see, right, these are fifth, sixth, seventh grade kids standing around after school singing, but they're engaged. They actually took it very seriously. And so beyond the broader context of Anne's stories, we also spent time discussing the importance of writing for Anne, who is an active and self-described chatterbox who was forced to remain still and silent for long periods of time. So we have in rehearsals, we sometimes have parents share where choir members can reflect on their forms of self-expression and Anne's experience being quiet. Anne's story and Shoshana's question, what do I still believe, becomes an important point of engagement for the singers. Students share with each other orally, through writing, or in the Anna's Place case, through art, what their knowledge of Anne's story invites them to affirm. And they reflect on how, in singing Anne's words, they are giving her voice. The choral piece itself creates space for their own affirmation, along with Anne, I still believe.
Ready? Right there. 1, 2.
Bad people are good. Bad people are good. I still believe. Bad people are good. I still believe. Bad people are good. I still believe. Bad people are good.
Down.
I still believe that people are good.
Ready? Right there. 1, 2.
Bad people are good. Bad people are good. I still believe that.
We can't seem to get to the next slide. Sorry about that. So I'd like to talk a little bit just about the benefits of Holocaust pedagogy with these kids. So as you could see in that last clip, and again, I apologize that I don't have super polished clips of this. The Holy Name people are working on making a beautiful little video of the performance. But you can see how the girls in the choir decided that they wanted to have choreography, sort of call out, and they have there's another moment in the piece also where each of the children sort of calls out, I still believe, I still believe, I still believe. And it's a very powerful moment when you watch them perform this. So we've now had this piece performed by 2 choirs, and we find that the students do feel a strong sense of engagement with Anne and her story. We find them showing up with copies of the diary at rehearsal and asking lots and lots of questions. So it's a point for self-confidence and also pride. The students share with us that they feel a sense of responsibility to sing for Anne because she can't. And other students not in the choir feel their excitement. A lot of non-choir students at Holy Name of Jesus and their families came to the event where the choral piece was premiered. And parents of at least 6 children not in Anna's Place called and asked about getting their children involved in the program because their children had heard about it from children in the choir at school, so not at Anna's Place at all. So that's just kind of anecdotal information from the director of Anna's Place, but to me, that's positive feedback. So the premiere of I Still Believe took place at the 2023 Yom HaShoah commemoration that Loyola hosted at New Orleans Choral Synagogue in partnership with the synagogue and with the Jewish Federation. And we had about 250 people in attendance. The second performance was the one that I just mentioned last November at Loyola in commemoration of Kristallnacht. And in both events, the choir was followed by a talk by a survivor. And we had about 150 people at that event. So looking at these two events, just to wrap up, I want to share several broader impacts that we've noticed. One is that this is a kind of cost-effective way to do Holocaust education. If the school already has a choir or a music class, they can learn the song. You don't need a lot of resources to create an event in conjunction with our Anne Frank exhibit, if the Anne Frank exhibit is visiting your school, or you can include the exhibit, the song, as part of a larger school program. It's also an opportunity to reach out to the Jewish community or Holocaust or peace programming organizations in your community. In New Orleans, we've partnered with organizations such as the Jewish Federation, the ADL, the National Conference of Jewish Women, and as I mentioned, Choral Synagogue, to garner attention and to get an audience for our programs, right? The World War II Museum was not a partner, but they sent out an announcement about our program so that people would come. The choral piece is also a way for students to participate in larger events in the community, as our students did at this Holocaust Remembrance Day, for example, enhancing those events and also providing an opportunity for students from the ever smaller number of living survivors. And in the US, I don't know if people are watching from elsewhere, I know Mehek is, we are talking with a Holocaust education grant funding program to develop an application specifically to support hiring a pianist and a choral conductor so that resources are not a barrier to learning the song in under-resourced schools. A value added is the premiere of the piece at the Holocaust Remembrance Day commemoration revealed the added value of choral singing. Parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and siblings came for the choir, but they also toured the exhibit and listened to a survivor. So for many, it was their first visit to a synagogue and the first time hearing a survivor. Sometimes, right, people come because they want to hear their child sing, and then they get a little bit of education. So to conclude, I just want to share that, right, Anne is famous for her voice preserved in her diary, but when she was in hiding, most of the time she couldn't sing or even speak above a whisper. And in the end, her actual voice, as well as those of many, many other young children, were silenced. And she was very, very lonely. So the idea of giving Anne a voice and a community to sing with is a powerful and age-appropriate way to share the idea of resilience and resistance. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Naomi, that was fantastic.
Thank you.
So informative and so resourceful.
Thank you.
I just loved how you talked about that the presentation of Anna Frank in the form of choral music is a wonderful way to represent Anna Frank's diary, and how such a simple phrase, like "I still believe that people are good at heart," can have such strong and widespread implications. So I'll talk about that term that we have been talking lately. Do you think that representation in the form of these choral music is a way of transcreating Anna Frank's diary?
I do. You know, I feel, right, it's not her diary, right? It's a line from her diary, but she herself rewrote her own diary, right? She took her text and then decided, oh, I'm going to take this diary and I'm going to write a novel. And so I think that it's a wonderful text to engage with, and there's a way in which we can make it culturally appropriate and connect to our students so that they feel an impact with her, whether or not they're going to sit down and they're, you know, from a literacy perspective, they're capable of reading, you know, a 300-page diary. So yes, I think it's a really powerful form of transcreation.
Great. Megan, go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Naomi. That was really, really, really amazing. And fascinating to see Anne's story be turned into, a choral piece or some of her words. I think it's interesting to me, and I want to know if you could talk more about like how you evaluated the impact that this had on the student's ability to learn and relate to her story, as well as a tool to perhaps make Holocaust education more effective or resonate more with students. Because in the work that I do, it's an effective way, in some of the literature says that an effective way to combat prejudice could be through things like plays and movies, and where people are either taking on roles of other people and they have to embody those people, or they watch people embody those characters. So can you talk more about how you measure that impact?
Well, I have to be really honest. First of all, I agree. I mean, I think it's a form of embodiment, and I think it's also an appropriate form of embodiment, right? Like, I think we all pretty much agree, right? We don't want children singing like, "What would you do if you were, hold up, and people had a gun at your head," right? Like, this is not helpful, but this is a sort of positive, I think, form of embodiment. But I also have to be honest that we haven't done a formal assessment yet, because we were sort of working on rolling out the program. But some of the tools that we've used in assessing it have been, first, like the secondhand reports from parents and the administration and teachers at the institutions about the kind of things that people have said, or even the conduct. Like, as I said, a whole group of girls at Holy Name of Jesus showed up with copies of the diary, or the people who told, "Oh, you have to join our program," like little girls who went home. Also, the time that I spent talking with the girls about the impact was an interesting way to evaluate it. And we also do what I call the turkey hand evaluation, which is where we ask students to draw a turkey hand and, like, what did you like? What stuck out for you? What did you not like? What do you pledge to do as a result of this? What was there not enough? And so in those materials, right, they said that they felt a connection. Now, how that is going to play out, and in fact, we can talk offline if you have some suggestions, or anyone else watching this has suggestions for good evaluation instruments. That's kind of the next piece, because I feel like students feel very engaged, it seems like, in the moment of performing, and they go around singing the song and thinking about it. But we haven't done anything to see, well, what are these girls, and the girls especially seem to connect to it, but we haven't done any sort of follow-up 6 months later. Are they still thinking about Anne Frank? What kind of impact that's had?
Thank you.
Wonderful. Carolyn, go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, thank you so much, Naomi. It was fascinating, and so impressive to see this type of engagement. So I have a question, and just to understand a few things. You mentioned Christian students coming to a synagogue and the engagement of I would say, a non-necessarily common setting to learn about Anne Frank. So I'm curious in what way you can talk a little bit about the impact or hope for relationship between Christians and Jews, and if you think that this is a good way to cope with anti-Semitism. If you think that anti-Semitism was something that became apparent and clear to these students, and if there is, maybe this is like one of the ways to start, I don't know if combat, but at least recognize. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I sort of have multiple responses to that. I mean, one is, right, Loyola is a Jesuit Catholic institution, so we have partnerships with Catholic schools. And when we were trying to start this out, Desiree Rodriguez in the president's office spoke to me and said, we have this partnership with Holy Name of Jesus, and we think it would be wonderful if you use the exhibit and you did this work, started with them. And so, I was thinking about it from the perspective, well, these are students who don't know a lot about even what it means to be Jewish, let alone the question of the Holocaust. And sometimes, I mean, the Catholic Church, right, since Nostra Aetate in 1965, the church has a sort of improved attitude, I guess we could say, towards Judaism, but there are still things in the texts that are problematic. And so one of the pieces that I definitely include in this, in our trainings around the Anne Frank exhibit, which are not necessarily part of the standard training that some other places do, is we spend time with them, like talking about who actually are Jews, what do they believe, just kind of breaking down just some of their understandings. And even in some cases, when I worked with Brother Martin, which is a boys' Catholic high school, we talked even about Jesus's Jewishness, because it was appropriate with them and the questions came up. With Anna's kids, we were actually supposed to take them to the synagogue. We had arranged, because they were interested after hearing about Judaism. They wanted to know what a synagogue was. And so, right, I have a synagogue, I'm a member of a synagogue, and they were very excited about doing that. So that, I think it is a step in anti-Semitism, in fighting anti-Semitism, but I do have a caveat that I will get to in just one moment. With the Anna's Plate, with the premiere of the piece and the Holocaust commemoration event, the primary idea at the beginning was not for them to be in a synagogue, but it was the end of the semester, and there were so many events going on campus that there wasn't any space. And my synagogue is near campus and is a beautiful historic synagogue. And so I talked to the rabbi, and she said, oh yes, let's do it here. And so we set up the exhibit in the social hall, and we had the singing in the sanctuary, and the Holocaust survivor was up on the bima, right, was up on, I guess, the altar, right? You would say, like, she and I sat in chairs kind of having the conversation of her story. So there was this way in which the space, it wasn't necessarily designed, and you're going to come to the synagogue. But I sort of realized after we got them there, these people have never been to a synagogue. And many of the parents said, we've never been to a synagogue. Can you explain this? And then the president of my university, the rabbi, led the opening prayer, but we had a prayer at the end by the president of my university, who's a priest. And it was a very appropriate prayer. And that was really, really powerful. So I think, right, there is a space for using these events to create, at least in our case, Jewish Catholic dialogue. Now, I will say I teach at a Jesuit university. I was teaching a class, right, on Anne Frank this semester. We spent a lot of time at the beginning of the semester talking about historic anti-Semitism and Nazi anti-Semitism. And after October 7th, when I decided to have a class and say, well, let's talk about contemporary anti-Semitism, not all of my students could see the link. So I think it's a work in progress, but at least it's a space to have these conversations. And in my class, there were students who drew a connection, right, between the idea of the blood libel and the bombing of the hospital that was allegedly by Israelis and turned out not to be, right? So that's like, some of them brought up the idea, well, is this a version of the blood libel? So I feel like, yes, right? It definitely is a way to combat anti-Semitism, but still the link between anti-Semitism of the Holocaust and contemporary anti-Semitism isn't always as clear as we might hope.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
No, that was a long answer. Any other questions?
Any other questions? Darren, yeah.
Naomi, I'm curious, do you find that the boys or that the girls kind of attach to the message more so than the boys do in terms of how much they internalize and get transformed from it?
You know, that's an interesting question. It happened to be in the case with the two performances by the choir. There were a lot more girls in the choir, and but there were boys who had participated in the training who were in the choir, and one was sort of actually his voice was in the middle of changing when they performed, and he was like talking to me about feeling about sort of that space and how he could like understand Anne's feelings of uncomfortableness, which I thought was pretty mature. But I would say like in these groups with the choir, the connection was definitely more with the girls. But on the other hand, we haven't sung the choral piece with an all-boys school, but we did a training with an all-boys Catholic school, 8th through 12th graders, just with the exhibit last spring. And the boys were really, really engaged. And it was the first time that I'd worked with an all-boy group of adolescents or a group of adolescent boys that was only people identifying as males. And it was a totally different experience of like, because a lot of the stuff, like a lot of the peacocking that goes on when you put teenage boys around girls, that wasn't there. And so that was a transformative experience for me. And those boys really, really connected with Anne Frank and, came back actually and went to this Yom HaShoah event, like on their own without any like extra credit from school or anything, and came to hear the choir and came to meet the survivor. So that was really cool. So I think boys can connect.
That's interesting. Yeah, I can easily see that. Mix them together, you're gonna get boys.
So I'm really interested to see what happens if we do like a boys choir. I still believe, but so far that opportunity, I haven't been able to work out that opportunity yet. We're still kind of rolling out the experience.
Well, yeah, and I think traditionally it's definitely choirs seem to be a little bit more of a girl thing traditionally, and it would be nice to see more boys engaging in it. So I want to ask a question, and I'm the guy that asks the insensitive questions, so
you go for it.
Bear with me here. And I guess I'm curious about this from your perspective as an adult, philosophically, maybe from you, but also I'm curious as an educator, if this even gets brought up, and should you bring it up? So I hear Anne Frank and the choir say, I still believe that there's good in the world as she is executed, as millions are executed. And man, it just strikes me as, if it were any other type of literature, it would be seen as ironic. It would be irony. If not just a flat out contradiction. So, how do you, the adult, deal with the contradiction? And then as an educator, is it something that you can even bring up with the little kids, or is it just not age appropriate? The notion that, that this might cause some cognitive dissonance here. The world, she said that while she was alive, not while being executed.
Right. Well, I think, right. I think that's a legitimate question. And that's right. Why you have probably like a whole line of scholars saying like, oh, like this line, this is a ridiculous line. But part of it is that she writes it in her diary. And in this portion of her diary, right, she has the diary that she starts in June 12th, 1942, that she keeps throughout her time. And then in March 29th, 1944, she decides she's going to rewrite her diary. She's going to write this novel. And it's not done when she gets arrested. But this part, right? So for July, we only have the actual diary. She may have been thinking about that part for an audience, had more sense of an audience, but this is in her diary. It's not in the novel she envisioned, Head After House. And she's really talking about, I mean, when I read it in the context, I think if you just take the line by itself, you're like, oh, okay, like clearly she didn't know what was going to happen. But to me, it's like this affirmation that I can't become this horrible negative person who's only going to dwell on death, who's just going to be here saying, we're all going to die, we're all going to die. And her mother was kind of like that. Like her mother, you know, confessed to me that she really thought they were never going to get out of there. And so I really think it's almost like a mantra. Like, I still believe, like, yes, like I see this, the world is becoming, you know, a nightmare. I hear the rolling thunder, we're going to be destroyed. And like, I just can't live my life like that, because literally the only thing I have left, and like, I don't have any friends. I don't think my father doesn't understand me by this point. Those of you know her relationship with Peter, like she's fed up with Peter in the same sense. She says, you know, I'm just done with Peter, but I just feel like I'm trying to get him to improve himself a little bit. Like, what's he going to do if I just say I don't want to be any friends with him anymore? Then like, who's he going to talk to? But she's even like, this is a mess. I don't want to be with Peter. And so like the only thing she has is this diary. And the only thing she could do is like, I'm just not going to be that person. I'm going to be the good person. So that's how I read it. Now, what she would have said, I can't say what she would have said in Bergen-Belsen or Auschwitz, because she's not there yet. So, right, we are reading her diary, and that is something we bring up with the kids. And the kids do know that she died. I had a really moving conversation, you know, with, I mean, the other thing is like the kids in Treme, right? We have a very high rate of gun violence in New Orleans. So aside from the fact that like the kids in the schools here, I mean, I talk to my students, they're all like, oh yeah, we had like the lockdown drills and this and that. Like students know that you go to school with the idea that there could be a shooting, but also the, you know, some of the kids and students in my class, like they have family members, right, who are victims of gun violence. And so these are kids who know about people dying and who know about hunger, right? And this one little girl, she was 8. And when I started talking with Anna's, I actually didn't realize that there were going to be girls in the choir who were 8. But she was really excited, but she came up to me and like, she got a little bit confused because they said to her, oh, and Miss Naomi's daughter wrote the piece. And so she came up to me and she's like, so your daughter was Anne Frank and she died? And she was like, she put her little hand on my arm and wanted to console me. And I said, oh no, honey, like my daughter, right, Anne Frank did die. And that's really, really sad. But it was a long time ago. And my daughter is healthy and expecting a baby, but she lives far away. And that's not why and I showed her a picture and she was really happy to know that, you know, so there's also like, I can't know what every person is taking away, right, from this experience, but I do know, or at least I still believe that they're gaining some kind of empathy. And that's really my goal here, that I want them, I mean, even when they think about the Holocaust, when they think about anti-Semitism, that they don't think, oh, there's like this bunch of victims, and I don't know who those Jews were, but they were victims. You know, maybe there's some reason for that. You know, when they say to me, I've had, you know, more than one of my Black students and more than one of the kids working with the exhibit has said to me, oh, her yellow star is like my Black skin. And right, that sense of connection, right? I mean, it's also, right, powerful and moving and troubling, right? That you know, that you feel your skin is a danger and a sign. But their minds are going there. So
Well, I love hearing that, and I hear you say the empathy is really being developed, and that's the transformative process. They're empathizing with Anne and her family and the situation. Um, yeah, I have to admit, I'm watching the choir sing, my initial impulse is to say, oh, it kind of trivializes it a little bit. In the sense that like it, I guess I want to push back and say it glosses over the barbarism, the ugliness of it, like the torture, the ghettos, the concentration camps, the train cars, but there's still good people in the world. It almost, and I just worry, is it trivializing, and is it glossing over, and are we lying to the kids? I mean,
well, I think that for one thing, like that's why we contextualize it, right? That's why we tell them that this is not the whole story, but also both times this piece has been performed. And again, it's only been performed, twice. I can't say like, oh yes, and in the 50 times, in the 2 whole times. It was the piece was composed to be performed in the context of seeing this exhibit, or we have a traveling exhibit that we downloaded that we worked with Yad Vashem on children of the Holocaust. But then like the choir sang, and then the choir sat there, and the next piece in the program was the survivor. So the survivor at the premiere was a woman named Anne Levy, who was a hidden child in the Lodz and the Warsaw Ghetto. And then her father got them out, and then she was hidden with a Catholic family in Poland, and then the whole family made it to New Orleans. And so she's lived in New Orleans. She's 88. And in 1992, a Ku Klux Klan member, David Duke, was running for, I think, the governor. He ran for the governor one time in the Senate, and both times, like, she confronted him in the Capitol. She'd never talked publicly about her Holocaust story. And she went up and confronted him, was like, you're a Holocaust denier. Why are you here at this Holocaust commemoration event? And it was caught on camera. And then she just hounded this man and gathered others around him. And he was not elected as either governor or head of the Senate. So she was the one who spoke after they sang this song. So like I agree, like when you get fired up, like you go around, it'll be an earworm in your head. You'll be singing, people are good. But it's also, I think, so I agree, you need to make sure that this isn't the whole story of the Holocaust that they know. Like that's why there's pedagogy around the song. But also, if you're going to make change in the world, you have to believe that there's an inherent goodness. Like there's the possibility of inherent goodness in each of us, right? I mean, I think like that's a fundamental belief that I carry. And I also study the Holocaust and know that not everybody lived up to their inherent goodness, right? But even in New Orleans, right, Louisiana has the highest rate. I think Arkansas may beat us now, but we battle with Arkansas for the highest rate of incarceration in the world. Like, and if you go to jail, if you go to prison for life, you're going to die in prison here in Louisiana. And right, you need to be able to see that even those people in prison, right, are right, that they're human beings, that they have an innate human dignity. I mean, that's also why I think the translation is really important. Like, she doesn't say people are good at heart. She says, I believe in the inner goodness of people, right? Which is much more sophisticated. So we try to get them, but the song does say people are good at heart, right? And it adds a whole bunch of stuff she never said. So
I'm curious, do you have have you encountered this with the children? I don't know how, was 8 the youngest or the oldest?
It was the youngest. They were 8 to 12. The first choir was like 5th to 7th graders. And everyone in the Holy Name of Jesus choir, that was the plaid skirts.
Okay.
Those ones were 5th to 7th grade. And they had the exhibit, the Anne Frank exhibit, they had done a couple of months earlier. And so we trained a group of students as docents, some of whom were in the choir, some were not. But every student in the school had had a tour. Every student from 4th grade up had had a tour of the Anne Frank exhibit. So it wasn't, they already sort of knew a little bit who Anne Frank was before they sang the song.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be curious to know, especially as this is performed more, if this ends up becoming a thing, where somebody's saying, hold on, is this, I feel like I'm being lied to here because we know the end story here. And her diary and novels and all of the never forget kind of stuff didn't really work. There's still anti-Semitism and there's still genocides. So it's interesting. Yeah. I'm hoping somebody can fill in a little bit of time here. I am desperately looking for a video. I just want because to fully encapsulate what I'm saying, because I think what you're doing, it has the potential of being so powerful. I also am just wanting to explore the possibility that maybe there needs to be another added element
but there is, like, we have, I guess not for the people listening, although it's been presented in the context of these survivor events, but the students who so part of the plan, like the pedagogical plan, if you're going to do this thing, is they watch The Short Life of Anne Frank, which is a 29-minute movie by the Anne Frank House, narrated by Jeremy Irons. So that kind of gives them a sense of who she is and gives them the background. And both times when the song has been performed, I've introduced it and I have kind of a contextualizing so that people understand, like, this is a person who suffered tremendously and died, who is really struggling, to affirm her beliefs. And we ask them to think about, like, what is a core belief that you're going to hold on to? And what are you going to commit to do so that people don't die like Anne Frank did, right? So that's ideally the message, but I think you're right, that there can be people who are going to say, like, no, this is too trivializing. There are other people who don't really care and are more concerned, about the fact that Anne said, I want to touch another girl's breast, and describes, genitalia in her diary, which she cut out in the revised version. She was like, oh, I can never write such a thing again. So Anne was the original Bowdlerizer there. But I think your point is really well taken. I think the piece is designed to be used in a certain context. And one of the things, I felt like, oh, what happens, if this becomes like a choral staple or whatever, and it's just like sung at Christmas, or whatever, is that trivializing? And like, oh, we need a piece, we're singing all these Christmas songs, so we need a Jewish song. Like, I don't want this to become the Jewish song for but except, it is written by my daughter, so of course I want everybody to listen. But you raise really, I'm not going to say, oh, those are ridiculous questions. I think it's important to think about these things, and I take it seriously.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, because and I finally found the video. If you would just if you would humor me and let me play a minute of it, because this video is exactly what comes to mind when I saw the choir, and maybe it's just because I have this in the back of my head. But I also want to highlight what Carolyn says here in the comment section, which I think is valid, that maybe sometimes we need to trivialize or minimize something or put it in a less gruesome context first and build from there. But if you would humor me, let me just play this for 2 seconds. And you'll see exactly why I'm bringing this up. And of course, it doesn't want to play. Hang on. I forgot to click these buttons.
The ones I didn't know.
Exactly.
And so did you remember those
All
buttons?
the children of the world, every color, every race, all are covered by His grace. Jesus loves the little children of the world. He calls the children dear. Come to me and never fear. I will take you by the hand, lead you to a better land. For I love the little children of the world. Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world. Every color, every race, all are covered by His grace. Jesus loves the little children of the world.
Okay. And I'll stop it there. The video just keeps getting worse and worse as the children's chorus continues to sing. And the point, of course, is to show the stark contrast of what's being sung and the reality. So that's why, that's why I think it's such it has the potential of being very powerful. I can also see where we might want to bring in something additional so that it almost doesn't sound like it's that video in a way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, right, I think that's true. But I think also like the, right, the context, again, the 100, not necessarily all 150, but certainly like 50 or 60 of the people who were at the talk where the Anna's Place kids performed had tours of the Anne Frank exhibit right before, which, right, goes through her whole life, has pictures of Auschwitz, has pictures of Bergen-Belsen, like, covers what happens to all those people.
Yeah.
So
I wonder what would I'm just my mind's running a million miles an hour here with some curiosities, because I do wonder if we would see a difference in from people who tour the exhibit first and then the chorus singing, or reverse it, chorus singing then the exhibit. I'm just wondering if there would be any differences. So, well, thanks for entertaining my questions.
yeah, no, it's interesting to think about, right? And I'm always, right, the key question is, how do you educate people about these topics? How do you teach little kids? How do you turn it? All sorts of questions, right? How do you keep this from being trivialized? So thanks for the questions.
Yeah. That was a wonderful discussion as well, Naomi.
Thank you.
Any further questions? I don't think of any. No. So I don't think there are any further questions for you, Naomi. So I'll let you have the final word.
Well, I just want to thank you all for taking time with this on your Saturday afternoon or early Sunday morning. I really appreciate the opportunity to share this with you. And if you are interested in using the work, using the choral piece and the pedagogy that goes with it in your community, feel free to reach out to me, because we like the idea of having the piece performed and children having the opportunity to learn from Anne. So thank you very much.